Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's exciting panel. By way of introduction, my name is Ileana Orris-Valiente. I'm a managing director at Accenture, where I am responsible for our Canadian innovation strategy. I lead multidisciplinary teams that are able to help our clients tackle some of their most challenging problems, as well as to tap into new opportunity spaces. What we have been pushing for at Accenture for many, many years is the rise of digital, the rise of technology, and its responsible use. What we thought was going to take a decade is moving incredibly quickly and will probably take no more than 3 to 5 years. Our clients are realizing that they wish they had invested in things like moving to the cloud and data years ago so that they would be in a much better position today. Here we are dealing with the COVID crisis. As I reflect on COVID, from the moment that it hit, there were 3 priorities that emerged for our Accenture business. The first order of business was making sure that our people were safe and that we were able to transition our workforce of 500,000 people globally to virtual. Luckily, we had not only been advising our clients on how to embrace the workforce that's digital in the future, we've actually been applying those principles ourselves. So we were able to make that transition quite quickly, quite smoothly. The second order of business that emerged was helping our clients. And for them, the importance of collaboration has never been higher in order to make the right decisions with the right people at the table and to do it quickly. When the pandemic hit, we were flooded with requests from board of directors, from our client executive teams, asking, how do we run our sessions in a virtual way, which we've never had to do before, because it has never been more important for our business that we have the right people in the room making the right decisions. And so helping those organizations pivot their strategies to adjust to the new reality, that was a major, major part of our focus. And the third piece that came out as a priority for us was all around resilience and allowing people to be truly human, recognizing that for the first time ever, we are all working from home. I have never seen the insides of so many people's homes, whether they be our colleagues, whether they be our clients. We've all seen each other's spouses. We've seen each other's children. It has been truly humbling and a way to show us that at the end of the day, we're all truly human. I am an optimist. And so I'm constantly looking for the silver lining. And for me, the silver lining I see through COVID is the ability for us to use this chance to reimagine what we consider to be normal, to use the power of design to design the right systems that are inclusive, that support each of us in our unique needs as individuals. So as governments, as corporate board of directors, as business leaders are transitioning into this new world, do we have a chance to dismantle some of the systems that perhaps were not as inclusive and open as they could have been and design for a world that we're all really proud of? These are some of the questions that I'm really hoping our panelists today are able to dive into. And I'll pass it over to our moderator for the panel, Asma, who runs Accenture's Ventures practice, to kick us off. Thank you and welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, children and families and all those watching. My name is Asma Shahsaman. As Ileana mentioned, I'm the Ventures Lead for Accenture Canada. And really what we're doing is we're connecting the latest and greatest startups to our clients to create transformations in their business through new emerging tech. Today, I'm your moderator. Alongside me are 3 trailblazing women of 2020. Today, Accenture, in collaboration with the International Forum of the Americas, is excited to host our session, Trailblazing Women in 2020, and Shaping the Future for Corporations, Startups, and Governments. So, as Ileana pointed out, amidst this pandemic, one of the most beautiful outcomes has been seeing our colleagues, their families, their partners, their children, and pets kind of sneaking up in the background. So we welcome everyone and all our extended listeners this morning. As we know, life has changed drastically over the last 7 to 8 months. Our everyday commute has changed. We're in living rooms and kitchens, and we've created these beautiful home offices. And amidst all these changes, we're now asking ourselves how and how long. And as an optimist as well, we're uncertain though. So this raises the question of how will this impact women in the workforce, or now this new digital workforce? What does this look like for us? Will this be a year? Will this be 3 years? How will we grow? What will mentorship look like? How will we now try to break this digital work ceiling? As women in the workforce, we all can acknowledge we've faced challenges. As a minority in the workforce, the struggles have been slightly different, or the challenges, I should say. As a woman like myself, who wears hijab and identifies as a Muslim, the struggle has been a little bit more different. But slightly, and overall, we're very resilient. This morning, we've brought 3 incredibly talented women with us that will share with us their experiences and essentially this new way of life, and how will this impact women in the workforce, and how we will drive forward with resiliency. So without further ado, we have today here with us Annalise Cherney, Chief Presto Officer, Michelle Scarborough, Managing Partner, Strategic Investments and Women in the Women in Technology Fund, Zainal Mauji, the President of Home Solutions at Telus. So let's kick it off and get to know our panelists. And be a little get more raw and real with them before we ask the really tough questions. So to my panelists, I turn and I ask you 2 questions. One, firstly, what show have you been watching on Netflix or any other sort of platform that you're using? Or what amazing dish have you been kind of cooking during the pandemic that you love? And also, if you could please give a little bit of a bio about yourself. So off to you, Annalise, we'll kick it off.
That was a good twist. So very quickly, I have a 5-year-old son, and we have been enjoying baking together. So we've been baking a lot of bread, although I have to claim victory that I didn't only start this during the pandemic. It's just that we've had a lot more time to do that. So bread and lots of banana muffins have been the theme. Very quickly about me, I'm the head of Presto. This is the organization that runs transit payments throughout Ontario. Pre-pandemic, by February, we had 4 to 5 million regular customers at any one time, transacting 2 to 3 billion transit rides a year. And so, we've become what I like to say, we started as an IT project, and now turned out that we're a payments business. And very excited about all that comes, the mention of digital and the changes happening in technology and consumer payments. And more importantly for us, given that we're a government agency, I've been thinking a lot about our role in ensuring equity in transit, which means for us ensuring that people of all, economic, geographic, and mobility, abilities have access to transit and have equal access to transit. And so whatever we can do in the payment side to ensure that everyone can ride a bus or get on a subway or a train is our job. So we've been thinking a lot about the changes of technology and the role that both us as government, but also us as a technology company can do to make.
Thank you, Annalise. And as an avid Go Transit rider, I never thought I'd say this, but I missed my 2-hour Go train ride. Ziliana probably knows this in the morning in the office. 2 hours missed them. I never thought I'd say that, but I missed them. All right, over to you, Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Asma, for the invitation. So I don't have a ton of time because we've been very busy working with entrepreneurs across Canada, supporting them through the work of BDC as the Bank of Entrepreneurs, and also on the ground in BDC Capital, the investment arm of the bank, where we support a number of fund managers as well as many entrepreneurs that are recipients of the investments that we provide into their companies to help them grow. So from a cooking perspective, I'm going to have to rely on Annalise. I'll be over for muffins soon. When I do have time, it's Friends that I watch. The reruns are perfect. So, and a little bit of, you can park your brain. What I do at BDC and BDC Capital is I manage the Strategic Investments and Women in Technology Venture Fund team. So we have a very broad mandate, but I'll speak specifically to the Women in Technology Fund, which is really the beachhead of our work, and where one of the reasons why I joined BDC. BDC made a bold initiative a number of years ago to really put effort and focus on advancing women as entrepreneurs, we stood up a very specific initiative to help drive term loans into those businesses that were led by women. And we stood up the Women in Technology Venture Fund, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. So we have 3 legs of the stool of that fund. We support direct investments into women-led technology businesses that are venture grade, so looking at a big market opportunity. We have an indirect focus where we invest alongside our funds team in companies that, or rather funds that are led by women, where there are women in the GP. And then we spend an inordinate amount of time working in the ecosystem with partners like Accenture and others in order to grow the number of women leaders in technology and the number of women investors and board members that are supporting those companies as they grow into global leaders. So that's where I spend most of my time on a daily basis, and I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be working with all of you on this panel.
Thank you, Michelle. And it'll be great to hear as we go through the panel, the questions, the challenges some of the startups have been facing amidst this pandemic, as well as small businesses. Zainal, over to you.
Thanks so much, Asma, and thank you again for inviting me to the panel today. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'll start with cooking because I'm just a burst cooker. So I was very proud of my Thanksgiving dinner with 14 items that I did with my 10-year-old. It had us busy for a couple of days, but the family was able to enjoy that. In terms of content, this is where I get to be a content junkie because Optic TV is one of the amazing services that I have the pleasure of leading at Telus. What I love about our ability is that we merge over-the-top content with other content, whether that's local or what we think about as traditional content. My husband and I have really gotten into Schitt's Creek lately, and we're almost at the end, and it's a great Canadian production. What I do at Telus is I have this, humbly, I lead all of our home services. So anything that goes into your home, from internet to home security. We've launched a consumer health business. And what I find incredibly inspiring is the ability to think about traditional businesses and merge them with unique and growing and emerging businesses. So I mentioned consumer health as an example. And during COVID, I think all of us recognize the importance of our digital lives. When COVID first hit and we first experienced the lockdown, we felt like every day was Super Bowl with respect to the amount of traffic that we saw on our networks. And I'm so proud to say that we have world-leading networks in Canada. Certainly we have our work cut out for us to ensure that there's access and support across the nation in every geography and for every income level. But we do so much at Telus to enable that, from Internet for Good, which provides 200,000 families that are single family or assisted disability with access to subsidized internet. And I think that finally what I'll say is that what has truly emerged is this dependence on our digital lives. And we offer services like Babylon by Telus Health, which is an app that you can download and see a doctor after hours, or if you don't have a family doctor. And, these are the kinds of things that are going to continuously drive our economy forward and enable our digital capabilities. So it's very exciting as we see those services come to life.
Thank you, Zainal. I think we all got our invitation for Thanksgiving 2021. All right, so now let's get into some of the itty-bitty gritty questions. So as we know, amidst this pandemic, it has essentially fast-forward changes for governments, businesses, startups, and in general, the workplaces. How will these new standards, ladies, do you think will empower women? And I actually love just referencing to everybody, ladies, because it's all ladies on this panel. So let's go ahead and Michelle, if you can kick us off.
Sure. I think the pandemic has hit many hard, but it's also allowed folks to focus on what are the most important things. And it also accelerated what was already taking place in the market. So we saw, we already saw the sharing economy come to life. We saw the digitization of many industries starting to take shape. We've seen the digitization even of bricks and mortar retail companies that are looking at e-commerce as a platform to help extend the life of their businesses and also grow their distribution for goods and services. So we've seen the acceleration of things that were already starting to take form in the market. And what we're seeing now is an ability to take that one step further and actually look at how those new technologies are integrated across all aspects of our being. So everything from, as I talked about, the future of work and people working in a hybrid form, some going into the office a few days a week, some staying at home, more flexibility around childcare, more flexibility around taking care of the needs of the family in addition to taking care of the needs of the business, a little bit more of a holistic approach. And we've also seen the acceleration of things like telemedicine, where people aren't necessarily going to meet their doctor in their doctor's office or receive care, but they're getting access to care via different forms of communication, including on the internet. So we're seeing an acceleration of things that have already been at play. And now, as we all digitize ourselves in every aspect of our performance at work and at home, what that's leading to is really an increase in opportunity. We've seen some companies that have been hard hit, but we've also seen the emergence of more women coming to the forefront to start businesses. And even though you would see in the statistics that women have been hit harder, they're, as we were talking about here, and we've got a panel of very resilient leaders before us. A lot of women are starting to look at how they grow businesses. So we're actually seeing a bit of an acceleration of women stepping forward and saying, I want to build something that is sustainable. I want to build something that solves a unique problem that I myself might be facing or that my market is facing. And how can I do that either within the confines of my own corporation, or how can I do that outside of that? So we're starting to see that trickle more and more into the forefront. Couple that with a lot of women coming off the sidelines and looking at, I've got investable capital, and how can I deploy that capital? Where can I deploy it, and can I support women to do so? So we're also seeing that, which I think is a little bit more of a convergence than we've ever seen before, and to me presents a golden opportunity for us to really step forward and lead. I'm certainly seeing that in Canada, and I'm certainly seeing it in the United States. So I think there's a huge opportunity for women to take their power back and to lead and to leverage technology and their capabilities to be resilient, to build relationships around them, and support networks around them to really move forward. And we're seeing that, and we're very actively participating as a fund and as BDC in promoting more of that kind of effort and more of that kind of work.
Thank you, Michelle. Interesting that you mentioned that, a lot of women during the pandemic or amidst this crisis are coming out and saying, we want to build and we want to solve a problem. Historically, it's been known that some of the greatest startups have actually arisen during pandemics or during hardships, and you probably have seen that through VC dollars that have been invested during that period of time. So, Annalise, over to you. What are your thoughts around this from the empowering women in the commuter world? How have you seen this in your workforce?
Thanks. I think I would kind of build on what Michelle said, and yes, pandemics and other crises bring opportunities, and significant change often is times when all of a sudden there's an acceleration. What I've seen from the government side of things in general is an appetite to remove red tape, to accelerate work that was always kind of on the roadmap, but potentially is now either more urgent and or the value has gone up. And an example, close to my heart is what Presto's working on, which is we've been working for quite some time on bringing new ways to pay in transit, and with the nervousness of close contact in transit, all of a sudden having additional ways of touchless, quote unquote, ways to pay, whether it's e-ticketing on a mobile phone or bringing in credit and debit payments, which we'll be launching shortly. Those are things that we had always wanted to do, and now there's just a greater need for people to not be using cash, as Michelle mentioned, to move everything digital. We now expect everything to be digital, and all of a sudden we can kind of use that momentum to our advantage. So I see the kind of opportunity for less red tape. The other one, I wanted to touch on the beginning of the question, which was about empowering women. I think that this crisis and the move to online, largely for white collar workers at least, has required and in fact kind of incentivized different leadership styles. And I see as the great example the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the idea that you can have very different leadership styles in business and in government is super exciting. I think it's something that women and other minorities in the workplace, specifically in leadership positions, have been looking for. And so this idea that because there's just been such a shift in workplace culture and in work, in the way we work together and the way decisions are made and all of it, all of a sudden, these kind of more potentially vulnerable, open, inclusive leadership styles are things we need. So they're no longer not being tolerated, but actually required. And so I think it's a huge opportunity for women, not just in government, but also in the startup community and in private sector, big business, that we can actually have very different styles of folks around a boardroom table making decisions, and that this really brings all the richness of everything that everybody wants to offer. So for women specifically, I think it's a huge opportunity. And I've definitely seen that throughout multiple levels, both, folks in my teams who have stepped up, who potentially in the past weren't, the loudest voices in the room when the room was physically all together, but now all of a sudden have space to excel and to shine. And likewise, all of us who are in more leadership positions, taking just a different stance on what we value and what we're pushing forward. So it's, to me, very, very exciting. I know there's huge challenges, which I know we'll talk about later, but it is an opportunity, and I see women stepping into voids that potentially, maybe we're taking a bit longer to fill, and now accelerating and pushing harder.
Thank you, Annalise. And so, you mentioned a really beautiful point around the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and who would have thought in 2020 we would have seen a 5-month-old baby being breastfed inside the Parliament, right? It's completely something new. Now, Zainal, over to you on the big corporation side of Telus, and you come from a family of entrepreneurs. What are your thoughts around this and in empowering women?
I have to build on the excellent comments made by my fellow panelists, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about workplace culture. So we talked about leadership styles, we talked about empowerment and starting businesses, but what I want to maybe highlight is this enablement that comes from being able to be virtual. And, we're an organization, rightly so, given that we're a telecommunications leader, that had a very flexible work styles environment and culture, in the sense that a huge portion of our workforce already worked either at home or mobile. And we were able to weave in and out of being virtual and being in the office. But with the pandemic, I think that took things to a new level. And of course, we had to move all of our team members to work from home, and we were able to do that within, a few days and weeks, not months. And I think that what has really transpired from that is that, both the adoption of digital tools and capabilities like Telus, or like telemedicine and like video conferencing that we're experiencing today, as well as this humanization of it's okay to be at home and work and have multiple elements of your life, and how that has humbled all of us to a certain extent. I think that is an empowering environment for many, whether they're women or men, when they are trying to balance their lives. And so I think that there's an opportunity to really advance skills and capabilities on a level playing field, which is really what is required from my perspective in terms of advancing the best people and the best ideas and the most skilled environments, and of supporting people to achieve those levels. So I think there are some positive elements That said, I think we have to all be empathetic and sensitive to the individuals who have lost their jobs, who, the sectors of the industries in the service side and the hospitality side that are going to take a long time to revert from the impacts of this pandemic and get back to growth. But that said, I think there are many, many opportunities from a virtual standpoint that can be leveraged.
Thank you, Zainal. And now as we move forward from this, we heard about leadership styles and the impact on startups, government, and corporations. We're evolving both in this physical and essentially this virtual world that we're merging together and kind of marrying. How now, this question, I think this is truly a fundamental question. How can we make this virtual environment more inclusive? Before, we would be able to go into events and conferences and mingle, and you would be able to feel people's body language and see how they were interacting with you and bring more people to the table. Because at a conference room, when people were sitting around the table, it was very visible who was missing, what identity was missing, and you could start being able to approach and make changes. How now are we going to make this digital workforce, quote unquote, more inclusive? Annalise, over to you.
I mean, my short answer is I don't know. It's a hard question. I think it's something we struggle with. So one is that we're using tools that we all already had likely and weren't using, which is a really good thing. All of these tools like Blue Jeans and Teams and Zoom and everything, we all had access to them and in most cases didn't use them, or at least didn't use them to their fullest. And I see little things like, as an example, the ability to put up your hand in one of these online meeting tools. Well, actually, that allows you to kind of look and make sure that you're treating everybody, it's not the loudest person or the person who's interrupting, but actually, let's go in the order that the hands were put up. So there's kind of some meeting protocol or meeting etiquette that I see actually working to an advantage to kind of maybe neutralize the different styles and different workplace cultures that potentially had been entrenched for some time. It's tough, though. I think the biggest thing that I've found hard is, you don't walk around the floors anymore. You don't run into people having coffee or grab lunch or reheating a lunch at the microwave. You have to make an effort to reach out to people. And that by definition means that folks kind of get left behind if they don't happen to be part of, different groups that do get touched more often. So we've been trying at Presto and at Metrolinx more largely to, put in place virtual versions of walking the floor and having coffee chats, whether that's, setting up, afternoon socials and things like that, where I have monthly kind of open sessions where you can chat with Annalise. But I also do make sure that I try and reach out to people who potentially haven't heard from for a long time. It's tough, though. I think we do have to rethink what it means to have an inclusive culture, an inclusive workplace, when that workplace, quote unquote, isn't all physical.
How can we make the workplace or the virtual work environment more inclusive?
Yeah, I agree with Annalise that it's a tough question to answer without thinking about a multi-pronged approach, right? I think, Zainul said it very well, that this whole exercise has leveled the playing field, and our ability to create an inclusive culture really is about leveling the playing field. I agree that the digitization of many of the things that we do now has, in a way, forced our hand in that regard. It's also raised the question around, what does diversity and inclusion mean, and how do we bring these things together in a way where everybody feels as though they're part of growing something, they're part of a solution, and they can participate where their strengths, where they feel that their strengths are. So I think we're going to see an evolution with respect to this. Some of the things that we're that we're looking at and that we're doing outside of just the traditional, now I say traditional, leveraging, communications tools like the one that we're on today. But we're also trying to be very proactive about how we're inclusive. So things like internally and with our portfolio, doing things like D&I, diversity and inclusion review, and leveraging experts in the market that are skilled at this, and looking into our portfolio and looking through our portfolio and giving them the tools that allow them to think about diversity and inclusion in a different way, and then the tools to actually impact and implement change. Early days on that, we'll have to see how that goes over the longer term, but those are the kinds of discussions that we're having with our portfolio, and they're the types of discussions that we're having in the marketplace. And that market includes our portfolio, but extends well beyond that. As I talked about at the very beginning, we spend an inordinate amount of time in the ecosystem, and so in order to help again drive more inclusive practices, we're also doing things like master classes and webinars and ongoing communications, more communication than we ever have before with the market about what tools and resources are available to them and how they can work together, regardless of where they live, rural, urban, etc., in order to bring together the right resources to help them. And I think that's the one point that I'll maybe highlight is we have, again, to use the leveling the playing field point, we have been able to see more folks in rural communities identify themselves as being a potential entrepreneur, wanting to start a company, and really not seeing a barrier anymore to their ability to be able to do that because they can access most of the tools online. They can access people online. The ability to reach to the top of an organization has significantly diminished because you can use LinkedIn and other tools in order to get in touch with those people. You can leverage your banker and so on. So I think we're seeing a lot more of that also, and that's great from an economic perspective if you think broadly and in broad terms, because it's empowering people wherever they are, at whatever point they're at, to take what their passion is and actually try to figure out how to turn that into something that will be useful for themselves, societally, and for the economy. So I think that's just another facet of how we can help foster that.
Thank you, Michelle. Zainal, over to you. So looking at Telus, big corporation, you talked about subsidized, solutions for some of your customers. How is this workplace now becoming more inclusive for your workforce?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is maybe go back to the way that you phrased the question, Asma, at the beginning, in terms of, what are the limitations of the physical networking that and how do we replicate that in a digital world? And I guess I would flip that question and say, who wasn't at the conference that can now be at the table? Because I think that there are so many more points of accessibility, and Michelle really talked about that in terms of inclusion in various sectors of the economy or various opportunities, because there isn't a requirement to be geographically in the same location or to be in the same urban versus rural environment. When we think about the importance of connectivity, I think this is a critical capability for our country. And, to the point of taking a responsibility to enable solutions for those who have income challenges. I think the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity we have as a country is to ensure that we are creating policy and supporting the advancement of rural and full connectivity. And let's talk about the importance of that. There was an independent study done on white collar office workers, and they looked at of course, I don't think it would surprise anyone to see that they looked at sort of the impact during the pandemic on productivity in the workforce. And in the areas, and the United States was not one of them, because you still have 30 million people that don't have access to high-speed internet, productivity declined. But in countries like Canada, productivity actually increased. And if you think about, not having to commute and some other opportunities of being able to get work done virtually at a time when you couldn't before, or the ability to be more flexible in your workday, that changes what you can do and what you can accomplish. And so I think there are really great opportunities for us to think about that and think about policies of how do we ensure that companies are attracted to make the investments that they need to make to enable connectivity more broadly, because it will have a massive impact on our economy and our productivity going forward.
Thank you, Zainal. Wow, that's massive. 30 million people in the United States without internet. That's insane when we think about that number. It's almost 30 million people, 36 million in Canada as a country. It's almost a whole country doesn't have internet. Amazing. And so, this kind of shifts our questions a little bit to, we can start to make the virtual environment a bit more inclusive using some of these techniques that you ladies have been kind of implementing in your work environments. But I think, the pandemic has also created a lot of challenges for societies across the globe, in developing countries and maybe not so developing countries. But how can we make this situation, or how can we take this situation and turn it more into an opportunity for women? And Michelle, you teed us off at the beginning. So over to you around how are startups now coming out and saying, I want to solve challenges and I want to be part of amidst this change. And this alludes to my point a little bit earlier that some of the greatest companies, especially in the startup world and in emerging tech, arise during pandemics. So how can we now take this kind of global challenge that we have and essentially turn it into an opportunity for women? So Michelle, over to you.
Well, I think we're there, right? There's a huge opportunity before us. Canada certainly is at the forefront of that. And we've got some amazing companies in the country that are doing some outstanding things. I think the way in which we do that, though, is we provide them with the capital that they require. We provide them with the resources that they require. And by resources, I mean not just the money. The money is one part, but they have to, these companies that are growing now need access to customers. They need access to markets, and they need to be able to have the resources around their teams that allow them to take advantage of that opportunity before us. We are seeing that firsthand through the pandemic with some of the companies, just even in our own portfolio, that have seen tailwinds as a result of this. Some of the companies that have said, the management team sat down through COVID and said, what, this is crazy. We need to do something to help. So you're seeing, we've got clients on the banking side that are in the beer. They're in the beer business. Their livelihood is around brewery, and they've completely switched gears and they started making hand sanitizer for folks, and then creating a distribution network of many other breweries across the country to support that. We've seen companies in our portfolio that are in the telemedicine space that have just exploded through the crisis and now beyond that. And they're actually impacting change by creating a network of organizations and companies like themselves in order to create a network that is integrated, that makes it a little easier for hospitals to work with them, for doctors to work with them, for individual patients to get access to specialists and so on that they need in order to drive change and drive healthcare benefits and healthcare needs getting met in more of an immediate nature. So we've seen that. We've seen companies that are in the payment space where, through this period, many people lost their jobs or they were temporarily laid off, and so they weren't being able to pay their bills. And so one of these companies stood up and said, we're going to, it's a company named Cement in Calgary. You can look them up. But what they do is they empower by working with organizations and telecommunications companies and others, banks and so on, to help them identify ways in which to serve the end customer who may have a challenge paying their bill a little bit better. Serving them with, maybe a long-term payment plan and really working with both parties, the individual and the corporation, to identify where the gap can be filled. So we're seeing this in every aspect, in every angle of our economy. And so I think if we think about how to push that forward, it's really that combination of ability to provide capital, whether it's debt or equity or some combination thereof, but as importantly, if not more importantly, is the network and the ability for many of these companies to be able to sell to customers and to be able to get that first customer validation. There's an initiative that BDC does in cooperation with others, and we have a supplier a program, and through that supplier program, women can and diverse suppliers can apply. And if you're in that program, then you're going to be seen as a potential supplier's potential vendor for some of your services to a broader audience. So these are some of the ways. They're small ways, but they're super impactful in terms of the ability to actually build your business so that the business itself is sustainable and can stand on its own 2 feet, in addition to the fact that you're able to then position yourself to take advantage of an enormous market opportunity, if that's your choice and if that's the path that you've chosen.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. So we have about 6 minutes, and I have 2 questions from the audience, but so we'll go over to you, Annalise, and talk about how do we take this new situation and turn it into an opportunity, and then Zainul, and then we'll go into our 2 questions. Over to you, Annalise.
So I'll be very quick by saying yes to everything Michelle said, I'm an optimist, and I at heart, and in particular in times like this, and I think periods of great change do present huge opportunities for small business, for government, for corporate, and I mentioned it earlier, but the removal of red tape and kind of this appetite to say let's accelerate, I see across the board, and the things that we are doing collectively to improve the way we work because we were forced to. And I have examples in our organization of turns out we were doing billing, as if it was 15 years old, and overnight we moved some of it to 100% online, which should have been done 10 years earlier, So there are efficiencies to be had, and I think that this forced our hand in terms of running businesses better, which invariably means then there are opportunities to both grow and expand and get into new areas that all of a sudden become opportunities. But I really do see also a change of conversation, I think, and that comes to, across Canada, hearing discussions about measuring not just financial impact and economic impact of growth, whether it's small business or large, but also looking at environmental sustainability and social equity, and so that both business and government are looking to kind of take this time of change and really reflect on, one, are we choosing to invest people, money, whatever, into the right areas? And secondly, how can we do those things quicker and take more advantage of the time? And, the price of oil is a great example of now all of a sudden huge amounts more investment in renewable energy, something that I think many of us, myself, very much I've spent my whole career in environmental sustainability, and this is something that we've been looking for. So all of a sudden there's an urgency to diversify economically, but in a way that's environmentally sustainable. So I think there are huge opportunities, the times of crisis should not be wasted. And I think that all of us on this panel probably are in the space that we're thinking about how to take advantage of this time and of this pivot so that we haven't wasted the opportunities that are presented to us.
Thank you, Annalise. Zainul, over to you.
Michelle, it was so great to hear you talk about Cement. I'm proud to say that we were their first massive customer. And there's this symbiotic relationship, right, between small business and new innovative ideas and how those can be scaled through the corporate environment and beyond. I think that that's a great example of this trifecta and of, how do we create capabilities that are great for the customer, great for the bottom line, and great for the social outcomes they can deliver to the community. And what excites me about the way that I see business moving forward and about the passion that many people have in how we're going to advance business moving forward is that they're looking for businesses that achieve those things. And so, I think whether you look at capabilities like cybersecurity protection, or, we've talked a lot about telemedicine and digital health, or you think about things like digitizing agriculture, all of these things are going to enhance our customer experience. They're going to enhance our bottom lines, and they're going to enhance our social output and capabilities. And I think that's an exciting way for us to think toward the future about the areas that we're going to drive investments in.
Thank you, Zainul. So the best part about being digital is that you can go over time because they just gave us 10 more minutes. So we'll go on to our next question. So we have two questions from the audience that we'll get to in a bit. But what has been some of the struggles during this pandemic that have turned into blessings, let's call them? For me personally, I love running, so this has been a great excuse to get out and be able to run more. But what has been a struggle that, it has now kind of turned into a blessing, let's call it. Annalise, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned I have a 5-year-old, and I think like many with young children, it really truly is a blessing and a curse to be together a lot. We found the first 6 months hard when schools were completely closed in Ontario. To have a young one around 24 hours a day, everybody gets a little bit sick of each other. Right now with him back at school in kindergarten, actually it's just brilliant. He comes home in the afternoon, and I've managed to reschedule my time so that we eat dinner together every night. And it's something that, of course, as a parent, I had been trying to prioritize for the past several years, is to get home on time and to spend more time together, before he goes to bed. And well, now I happen to be, my office is in the house, so it's way easier. So it's been brilliant. We spent time learning together and sharing stories in a way that I know for a fact I wouldn't have been able for myself to carve out the time really in earnest as I do now. And hopefully, no matter how short or long this pandemic is, I'll be able to hang on to that habit of really scheduling my time in a way that aligns to my priorities as a parent and as a friend and so on, in a way that I think I just hadn't managed to crack in the past.
Amazing, thank you. Michelle, over to you.
Yeah, I'd have to say travel. I'm on a plane a lot, and I never really, I've lived in Toronto now for 3 years, and I never really knew what my condo looked like. And I didn't, take the time, because I was always on a plane, to sort of spend, decorating and doing all of those things. So I finally kind of came down to planet Earth a little bit and was able to do that. I have to admit, I do miss making my trips out to Vancouver and to Calgary and to Montreal and out to Halifax in order to see some of our companies and to meet with some of our entrepreneurs. But I don't miss the planes, trains, and automobiles to get there. And so that's probably been the biggest change for me, is just being able to be on the ground and kind of get a little bit, to be frank, a little more grounded in terms of where I want to spend my time and how I want to do it. So that I can be the best person for our companies, the best person for my team, the best person for all of my colleagues at BDC when they need me to. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Thank you. Zainul, over to you. And maybe you'll walk us through some of the amazing cooking that you've done during Thanksgiving.
Oh gosh. No. I think really when you take the combination of what Annalise talked about in terms of having the kids at home, not having to travel, and then you layer on top of that, I have 2 boys, they're 10 and 15, and not having activities in terms of, and of course that has its own impact. We want our kids to be active and social, both physically and mentally. So I wouldn't say that, we can do that for a prolonged period, but the hiatus really asked us to sit back and consider, and reflect and say, were some of those activities generating the right quality time, the right value for our kids, the right, was injecting all of those activities into our lives and creating this treadmill that we are constantly on, the right way to live our lives? And, should we be pulling back a little bit and thinking about, how to prioritize our time and how to work in that quality family time that I think many of us were feeling like we were losing or just trying to grip onto the last thread of. So I think it has been a blessing in terms of really forcing us to sit back and reflect and prioritize and think about, both for ourselves and our families, what are the things that are critical and important and that we're going to invest our time in, because time is precious.
Very true. Time is very precious. We have 2 questions from the audience, so I'm going to read it off my screen. The first one is, and it's to all the panelists, do women now have an opportunity to advance unlike ever because the old boys club may not work as well in virtual worlds, and more collaborative style women often use may work very well in a virtual world? Maybe Annalise, you can kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us should be delusional that the old boys club required, a club, a physical club. That said, I do think that it is an opportunity. I mentioned Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and this different leadership styles. I truly do think that this is an opportunity. I think it's kind of a pent-up opportunity, quite frankly. It's been a long time that we've been talking about authentic leadership. There's been a whole bunch of terms floated around. So the idea that women individually can step in and step up, I firmly believe this is a great opportunity. We shouldn't lose it. I do think, to the first point about the club, though, women need to empower and support and push each other and pull each other up ladders beside ourselves. And I think that, there's an opportunity here to connect with each other in ways, because we are all virtual, that can happen globally. It can happen by sector or by geography or whatever, in ways that potentially we knew were important before but didn't really crack, or just need to accelerate anyway. And so I think that the idea that there be a club doesn't mean we as women need to be excluded from it. We can start our own, and there are lots of great organizations, some of which I'm a part of, that do support women in leadership, women in boards, and so on. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, but the challenge won't stop. So I wouldn't want to think that because of COVID, have all of these kind of existing social networks, kind of dissolved, and all of a sudden there's a void. No, I don't think so, but I do think that it's a great opportunity.
Thank you. Michelle, over to you and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would build on what Annalise said. I think that there is an opportunity. I also think, though, that you need to think about what it is that you want to do. We've spoken a little bit today about the fact that people have taken a bit of a step back to think about what is important to them. And the balance, I think the work-life balance component has come to the forefront, both for men and for women, as they think about how they themselves want to interact in an environment, and then how they want to be, how they want to grow their career in an environment. So I think there's a bit of there's a bit of a measured approach to how you want to lead, and to build, to Annalise's point about the various different types of leadership, stepping forward in ways that are more authentic, I think, is going to become the norm, and not maybe seen as a disadvantage or a weakness. Vulnerability is certainly, I think, more important now than ever before, and I think there's going to be an opportunity to step forward and show your true self as you look at leadership, and that's going to go for men and women. But I think women right now have the opportunity to show, from a leadership perspective, what that actually means, because we sort of intuitively do that in ways that guys sometimes don't. So I think that's where there might be even more of an opportunity to sort of just show a different style.
Thank you, Michelle. Zainal, over to you. We just have 2 minutes on the timer.
Okay, maybe I'll just wrap it up and say, who cares about the boys club? So, I think that fundamentally, if we're going to move forward, we have to think about how to empower each other and ourselves to drive the customer, business, and social outcomes that we care about. And I think that we have to recognize, or at least I recognize, that in the country we live in the socioeconomic and diverse environment that we live in, we have a massive advantage relative to other women in other countries. And I think that we have to take that opportunity by its head and move it forward and push it forward. I don't think I've ever felt that I couldn't advance a business opportunity because of, what I would, call the old boys club. And I don't think anyone should feel that way. And if you do, find the right champions in your organization or in your community, and you will find them if you look for them. And if it's a great idea and opportunity, I'm an optimist at heart as well, I guess. And I believe that we can all push forward.
Thank you, Zainal. And we have about a minute left or so on here. Thank you so much, Annalise, Michelle, Zainal, for joining us today in Trailblazing Women in 2020, Shaping the Future for Corporations, Startups, and Government. And essentially, to kind of wrap it all up, we talked about balance in our family lives and what's been important to us during this pandemic, the tools that we're now using, and of course, the leadership styles that have essentially taken place through leaders like yourself. So what I leave you with is maybe all four of us can help one of the women in our lives right now, whether it's through mentorship, whether it's through just having a telecoffee meetup through Zoom or Teams or whatever it may be, and we can start kind of the movement from there. And essentially, and I'll go back to this, is let's continue to figure out the solution, how to create that inclusive digital workforce. And to Zainal, love your last point. Who cares about the boys club? We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, ladies. And maybe we'll do this again in FY21. Thank you.